Hi, everyone. I'm Ken Fisher of Atigro. Welcome to our virtual coffee series, Leading Apps to the New Normal. Today, we focus on tips and tricks for using LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Our strategic partners in my company, Atigro, have put together a series to address issues. This week, we're going to hear from the Pro Resource team, Judy Schramm, Richard Helmer, and Anne-Marie Bebout. They're the LinkedIn experts, and we'll focus this week on performing target searches to find and contact individual prospects, enhancing your prospecting techniques, optimizing advanced search, recent updates to Sales Navigator, and optimizing practices for managing leads using lead alerts in the inbox. We'll wrap up with an update on the latest on SBA programs and a question and answer period from our favorite U.S. Small Business Administration officer, Rod Johnson. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. These sponsors have made it possible to reach the community as well as provide support for these events. In addition to our partner sponsors, we have two community sponsors for this event to help us spread the word, the Special Needs Alliance and the Tysons Regional Chamber of Commerce. If you feel we're providing a service to the community, please help us spread the word. If you see an upcoming event email, please send it to others. If you see one of our LinkedIn posts, please like and comment on it. We greatly appreciate it. Anne-Marie, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Ken. My name is Anne-Marie Bebout, and I'm from Pro Resource, and we are a social media marketing company that helps CEOs and executives put their best foot forward with personal branding on LinkedIn and Twitter. So I want to open up by talking about Sales Navigator in more general terms. And then Richard will follow up with details and show you exactly how to use it. So as most of you who are on LinkedIn know, LinkedIn has many levels. They constantly remind you to buy a newer, higher one. So do you know if you need Sales Navigator for your job? So Sales Navigator has a lot of features specifically designed for the sales person. So you get more detailed searches, you understand more about the person that you're looking at, and you can send messages and connect with people who aren't within your 3 degrees. So it's a little bit easier to get visibility on people who aren't already in your network. So it is useful for any kind of like single person business. If you are doing a lot of your own prospecting, if you're looking for a lot of investors, if you are hitting those search limits at the end of the month when LinkedIn starts yelling at you saying that you've done too many profile searches, then it might be worthwhile looking into Sales Navigator. Also, if you are a hunter salesperson, the $85 a month is really going to be worthwhile because it's going to save you time. You're going to be able to build beautiful lists, do wonderful searches to really streamline your process. If you're more of a farmer salesperson, then Sales Navigator helps you map organizations and find other leads that you wouldn't necessarily know about. You get a lot more visibility on an individual person and the rest of their organization. You get the high volume of searches, which you're going to be doing anyway, and the quality of searches that you get back can really help you if you're a farming salesperson. So if you are the head of a sales team, if you are hitting those sales limits on a monthly basis, if you are a single operator or in a small team as an executive, and you need to find very specific people and want to be able to keep track of them in a beautiful way, then Sales Navigator is for you. So Richard, can you go ahead and show everyone how to get the most out of their searches using Sales Navigator?
All right, I am going to start by sharing my screen here. I want to make sure that everybody can see the Sales Navigator homepage here. All right then, so the most powerful, I'm going to go over all of the key features of Sales Navigator. The most powerful one is the search, but there are a lot of other useful tools that might come in handy. And I'm going to start at the front here. So when you first start up Sales Navigator, it's going to prompt you to fill out some questions, and it's going to give you like a base of saved companies, what they call accounts, and some leads in here, like already people you're connected with, to fill out this alerts area here. Think of it like your news feed. And what it does is it'll show you if people or companies, like they've been mentioned in the news or when they post an update. And what this is most useful for is it can help as like a conversation starter. So if you see that, again, like Morit here was mentioned in the news, you can say like, hey, I saw that, you know, you've gotten featured, and that can be a good way to sort of start a conversation. You can also sort, instead of just by relevance, by latest, so you see all the newest things. You can look for just accounts or just leads. And you can also sort by different alert types. So you can, you know, if you're specifically looking for, you know, if they were in the news or something like that, you can look at that. Next, I'm going to talk about the search function, which is, again, the most powerful part of Sales Navigator. When you first open this up and look at it, it has all these huge numbers of search criterion, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So I'm going to go through the ones that are the most useful to me personally in my job, and what I think would be most useful to you, because you don't need all of these. You know, some of them are things like what school they studied at. That can be helpful in some small cases. Again, you're looking for something you have in common with a lead and you want to, you know, have a good way of starting a conversation with them. But generally speaking, like, that's not something you're going to look for leads based on. So it's there, it can come in handy, but you can usually just ignore it. So keywords here at the very top, these are very useful, but I like to end my searches with them. So I'll come back to them later. Instead, what I usually start with is geography. So this is pretty broad. Like you see, it starts you off with Africa and continents, APAC. That's a little bit too much. I'm going to focus on the Washington, DC, Baltimore area. That's where I'm located. That's where most of you are located. And so, you know, a lot of business is happening here. But you can look countrywide. You can look based on states. Again, it's really flexible, very useful. Relationship is how far apart your connection is. Sometimes you're looking within your first connections, but often you're just going to look at second-degree connections or third-degree connections plus. But, you know, there are other ways this can come in handy. Industry is also often useful. So this is, again, you know, what the company that they work for is in. We do a lot of business with, say, information technology and services, but there's also hospital and healthcare, government administration. It's a fairly long and exhaustive list. One thing to keep in mind about it, though, is that it won't have what you might always think of as an industry. For example, we've had clients who want us to look for manufacturers. That's fairly common, but there is no manufacturing industry. So you have to sort of work around the list and look for like what's the most common, where do manufacturers tend to show up in the industries that LinkedIn has available, and use those to refine your searches. But instead, since I'm not looking for that today, I'm just going to focus on IT and, you know, associated services. Again, schools, not super helpful. First name, last name. I mean, if you know who you're looking for, you don't need Sales Navigator. Seniority level is also something we use a lot. Generally speaking, when we're looking for prospects, we're looking for decision makers at the company. So, you know, who's in charge, who is, you know, capable of actually helping us when we do when we want to, like, you know, sell something or help them sell something or things like that. So we'll narrow it based on owner, partner, and CXO. Often we'll go to VP and director levels, but for the sake of this example search, we're just going to stick with this. If you're doing recruiting or something like that, looking at lower levels can be useful, but it often isn't in what we're doing. Years in current position is also very frequently useful, because again, if you're looking to sell things, often you want newer people who, you know, they're new at the company, they sort of have the political influence, they can start, you know, making new decisions, selling new things. So we'll often look at people who've been in position, you know, relatively recently and you know, haven't necessarily gotten sort of set in their ways as much and are willing to try new things. Years of current company is similar to current position, but we don't use it as much. Function is also something we'll frequently use. I'm not going to use it in this search, but again, if you're looking for people within a specific department, like for example, sales, you can do that. Especially at larger companies, this is really helpful. You know, removes people who aren't looking for what you're doing, things like that. But what I often use to narrow things is the title here. So instead of going by function or keywords, I'll look for people who, you know, are maybe the CEO or they're in sales, And not, instead of using the functions, I'll use the title to narrow my search in that way. Maybe something like the CMO too, the Chief Marketing Officer. And what this does is when you search by title like this, you don't need an exact match. So if I search someone, if I just search sales there, it'll give me people who are, the CXO for say, have sales in their title if they're CXOs or owners or partners. So even though it's not an exact match, this is a good way to really narrow down your searching, your focus, without, coming in with the function and getting, a much broader brush. Title is generally more specific. Years of experience we don't use very much. The company filters, these are similar to the account filters. So if you're searching for companies, but the most important one for us is usually company headcount. So we work mostly with small businesses. So we'll look at, 1 to 10, maybe 11 to 50, and 51 to 200. And so you can, again, this is a great, since LinkedIn doesn't let you narrow by revenue, this is sort of the closest you can get for that, is figuring out what are the approximate headcounts for companies like those, and making sure that you're getting that, more or less right. And that can be, that's the best way to sort of narrow based on company size as opposed to revenue. Company type, we don't use very much. Past company, sometimes you're looking for people who used to work somewhere, that can be useful, but again, it's fairly narrow. The other filters are things that are unique to LinkedIn, so you can mostly ignore those. Now, as I've been doing this process, you may have noticed the number up here, the 406 results. As you add more criterion, that number will usually get smaller and smaller and smaller. And this is a good way to say, like, well, 406 people, that's kind of a lot. Do I want that many? So I'll go back here and say, well, I'm not sure I want CMOs. 400 is a little too much for me to be, well, I didn't actually cut it down very much. So we'll remove sales here. And we only lost 20 people, which, isn't a huge narrowing. So I could, in that case, try and use something like keywords, like, information technology. And what this does is it searches within those people's profiles. And so only people that have the phrase information technology will show up there. The key thing to remember, though, is this can be at any point in their profile. So this could be their past jobs, their current jobs, even just their skills, or maybe even the awards section. So like the more people fill out the profile, the more likely different keywords are to show up. It's also a Boolean search. So I put it in parentheses there, so that'll make sure the whole phrase information technology shows up. If I want to make sure that I'm getting IT as well, I might add or IT again, IT in parentheses. However, often searching for IT isn't great because it shows up the word it, which basically every profile should have. So I'm actually going to delete that and not use that in this search. So I think that this is sort of narrow enough for me to start with. I'm going to hit the search button and see what shows up. So we've got President and Principal Director, Dr. J Enterprises, SL Jordan here, Michelle Corin, CEO at Legatum LLC. And this is just going to show you, again, LinkedIn's ordering isn't always totally obvious, but all these people will be CEOs at a company with 11 to 200 people that do information technology services. Someone like SL Jordan here who showed up and is President and Principal Director, he probably is CEO at a different company. So if we open up his profile and take a look through here, this has all the same portions of a normal LinkedIn profile. It's just organized a little bit differently. So we can see he has a well filled out profile. I guess he may be not a CEO right now, but President and Principal Director is relatively similar. If you aren't comfortable with Sales Navigator because it looks differently, you can always look at their profile on regular LinkedIn. The simplest way to do that is click on the 3 dots here, and where it says View on LinkedIn, you can do that, and it'll pop up with the normal LinkedIn view. Now, let's say I like this search, but I need to go somewhere else. Something's come up, I've got to leave. You can save searches and keep them around. So you'll hit the Save Search button up here, and just, it default names to like your numbered search or whatever, but it's best to, so this is the virtual coffee example. Alert frequency, the default is weekly. I'd sort of leave it to that. But what this does is for the alerts, it will let you know when some of the results in the search have changed. Basically, Since CEO is a title that, people start new companies all the time, small companies hire new people. And that way you can go, when you have the search, you can just click on the most recent changes. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And it will show you the new people. And that way you can really look at like who's just gotten in, who's just changed. And again, that's a good way to do a conversation starter. Similarly, up here, you have more information like who's changed jobs in the past 90 days. Once it loads, who's posted on LinkedIn in the past 30 days. And these are basically good measures of how active a person is on LinkedIn. And the more active they are, the more likely they are to be responsive to outreach. So we often will start with, who's posted on LinkedIn, who's, being active. And it's also a good way to start a conversation. You can say, hey, I saw your recent post, your recent article. I think that's really interesting. Do you want to have a conversation? Stuff like that. To go back and access the search I saved, you just click on Saved Searches up here, which I've opened in a new tab. And see, I've got the virtual coffee example. Since nothing has changed in the past 2 minutes, unsurprisingly, there's nothing there. But if I were to look at this Chief Diversity Officer one, a Diversity Officer search back here, there are 460 new results. So clicking on this would show me all the new people who've shown up since last time I checked that search, which may even have been a few months ago at this point. But if I just click on Virtual Coffee Example, it comes back up here. Now let's say, to go back to SL Jordan here, I like his profile. This is someone I'm interested in contacting eventually, but I want to keep going through my searches. You can do what's called saving someone to a list. And this is also how you track people. So again, I'm going to do virtual coffee example 1023. And I'm going to, you can, give it a description too, in case you're going to come back to this way later and create and save. And as you add more people to this, like if I were to open a new profile like Michelle Coram here, I could similarly click on here and save her to virtual coffee example. And then when I click on lists up here, this will then just, and then click on virtual coffee example 1023, this just brings up, everybody that I've saved to the list. And you can make notes on like, have I sent a message to them? What have I done that's new? When are they added the list? You can connect with them or message them from here, or look at view similar, things like that. And this is just a very useful way of tracking your results and tracking what you've been doing. And so we make use of lists a lot. If I look at actions up here too, one thing I use frequently is to check my, my success. I'll click on search for leads. And what I can do is now I can search within that list. And a thing I'll do a lot is look at relationship and first degree connections. And so if I have 30 people on the list and I've sent connect requests to all of them or messages to all of them, then this will show me how many of them connected, and that can let me assess so how successful is my messaging, who actually connected, who do I need to follow up with, things like that. And this can all help you keep track of all of that. The other key search function, so I'm going to go back to home to start again, is the account filters. And this is basically their way of saying looking for companies. So it has some of the same, search features. Like again, I'm just going to start with the geography, the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. Can search within industries. Again, I'm going to do information technology and services. But the really great thing about the account search is the size filters. So you can look within a specific department and see how big that department is. So if I'm looking to connect with, people in the finance department at given companies, and I want to make sure, there's at least 10 people there, but, not more than, say, 50, just arbitrarily choosing these values. Already, I've gone from 7,500 to just 68 results. I can also look at their department headcount growth. So how much has the finance department grown in the past year? Obviously, we don't want them shrinking because they probably aren't looking to, buy new services. And so we want to make sure that, there is growth going on. They're hiring new people. And again, we've cut our search in half. Here, you can also search for revenue. But our experience has been that the revenue parameters, the data aren't totally accurate. So we tend to avoid these in favor of the headcount stuff. Hopefully, as LinkedIn develops and they get more of this stuff, this will get more accurate and more useful. But right now, this isn't as helpful. You can also look at their overall headcount, their headcount growth. How much are they growing these days? If they're on the Fortune 500 anywhere. And lastly, the really useful one is technologies used. This is another one that's still sort of in development. They aren't totally accurate. But again, it gives you like what technology are they developing with, what are they using, like Microsoft Azure, they do stuff for iPhone. And so this again can be really, really helpful if you're looking to sell to companies that, are doing, you work in a very specific industry and you want to make sure that the technologies you're using are compatible. Again, that list is still updating, still populating, still relatively new, but it is very helpful. And if I were to look at this search, it's showing me companies like Dysys or EIDL. Say if I take a look here, obviously I'm not going to go through the full analysis of everything, but if I like them, I can then save them to my saved accounts, and they're going to start showing up back home along with the people I saved in my person search earlier. They start showing up in the alerts here at the front. And so this can, again, help you start conversations and get information like what new is going on with EIDL or with, the 2 people I saved to my saved searches. You can also jump back into recent searches or recent people you looked at. So like I can look at Michelle Korn again, or the virtual coffee example search, or the lead list here, and that'll just pop right back in here. The last thing I want to cover is inbox quirks on LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So if I were to say send a connect request or a message to Michelle Korn here, then I would get responses in my Sales Navigator inbox here. And most of our clients who we work with, they aren't as comfortable. They don't know as much about Sales Navigator inbox because it's new to them and they aren't used to it. And they'd much rather work in their normal LinkedIn inbox here as opposed to their Sales Navigator inbox. And the easiest way I found to do that, to make sure that conversations stay on normal LinkedIn and you aren't trying to go back and forth and keep track of, well, where did I message Michelle Korn again? Was it in Sales Nav? I'll just view them on LinkedIn, on their normal LinkedIn. And then if I send a connect request from here or a message from here, then all of that will come back to the default message inbox. At any rate, that's what I have on Sales Navigator. These are sort of the best ways to do searches. Of course, we'll be around for questions later, but thank you very much for listening, and I hope that this is useful to all of you.
Thank you very much, Richard.
My pleasure.
Do we have any questions about LinkedIn Sales Navigator? If you're look at someone's profile using Navigator, are they alerted to the fact that you did like they are, as well as like your own, they can see who looked at the profile on LinkedIn.com. Can they see that if you look at them on Sales Navigator is a question?
Yes, they do know that you saw them. They won't know if you've saved it or done any other sort of interaction with it, but they will know that you've looked at their profile.
Okay.
I'll just add that there are privacy settings if you want to search anonymously. And if you may want to turn those off when you stop doing the active searching and just use LinkedIn as regularly. But there are privacy settings, and it'll say someone from a company like this was looking at your profile.
So Anne-Marie, you can basically be anonymous when you're doing this. If
Absolutely.
You make that. Yes. Okay. I have a question. What to someone who has an organization that's not using LinkedIn Sales Navigator, why would they start? Why should they start? Just take us from the, because we went into the deep dive. Why should they consider this at a top level? What have you seen change in organizations that have started using Sales Navigator? I'm not sure who wants to answer that question, but.
I think the biggest thing is, again, the power of the search. This can let you reach out to and start conversations with and form connections with, the kinds of people that, are difficult to interact with, particularly right now when, nobody can go to conferences and meeting in person is really difficult. I think a lot of companies need a new way to get, start forming relationships, and Sales Navigator is a really powerful way to make sure you're finding the right people to do that.
Great. And next up will be our favorite SBA loan officer, Rod Johnson. And I'm looking for Rod. And where did Rod go? So I'm going to spotlight Rod, turn it over to you. And Rod, what's the latest and greatest from our wonderful Congress on what they've been doing for the SBA programs and what SBA has been doing to implement that?
What has happened since the last time I was on? We have a new forgiveness form that's now called the 3508S form. So if you recall from the last time, we had the 3508EZ form and the 3508 long form. Now there's the 3508S form, okay? And for the past couple of days, I've been trying to work through the 3508S form and the 3508EZ form to see what the differences are. So then I could come on to, programs like this and say, well, if you are a single member LLC, a sole proprietorship, or a 1099 contractor, scrap the EZ form and just use the S form, okay? I'm almost at that point to say that you can do that. It'll probably take me another day or so to definitively be able to say, if you're one of those three, just use the S form, particularly if your loan amount is $50,000 and below, okay? So in a couple of days, I should really have that figured out, since I'm supposed to be the expert at this. We've gone over with, hopefully the stimulus package will be about $2 trillion, okay? And so with that, there will probably be a change in the forgiveness rules. Now, there has also been talk, I don't know if you've heard this, but there has been talk since the average loan size was about $110,000 that they may, with this new stimulus package, let's keep our fingers crossed, that they will raise it from 50,000 up to 150,000, okay? Little Birdie has told me that that's still a part of the negotiations for this new stimulus package. So if that's the case, then hopefully they won't change any forms on this, that we'll still be able to use the 3508S form for loans $150,000 and below, okay? Now, this is a shout out for the CPAs. I am urging all companies to use CPAs to help you fill out the forms correctly, because once you turn in your forgiveness form to your bank, there's no going back to make any corrections. There we go. So we have the loan forgiveness basics. Now, one of the questions that people ask is, tell me the difference between the covered period and the alternative covered period. A lot of business owners still have questions about that. And so as you see here, borrowers are eligible for forgiveness in an amount equal to the sum of the eligible costs and payments during the 8-week or 24-week covered period. So let me define covered period, which is the covered period begins when money is dispersed, okay? Or you have the alternative covered period, which begins on the first day of the next pay period after disbursement. So the firms that use this are people that pay on a weekly basis and bi-weekly basis, okay? So that's your alternative covered period. So now what are the eligible costs? And I go over this because I keep getting questions about what are the eligible costs. So the payroll costs, of course, are eligible. And as we know, that 60% of the money is supposed to be used for payroll. Now, if you're a 1099 or single member LLC, it's okay if you use 100% of the money to pay yourself. That's perfectly fine. In fact, it makes it easier because since you're just paying yourself, then there shouldn't be any reason why you should not have your loan 100% forgiven if you've used 100% of the funds for payroll. And hopefully what has happened is you receive the PPP money, you've put it in a different account. When you pay yourself, you write a check off of that account, you deposit it into your personal checking account. And so what you're going to supply to the bank is the statements that held the PPP money, the bank statements where your personal bank account statements where the money went into, and you'll have a copy of the canceled checks. Okay, so
Right.
go ahead.
A quick question there. So as a business, if you use the longer pay period, it's almost certain that you can account for most of the loan, if not all of it, as payroll. So is it better to go for the longer period and just put 100% payroll and not worry about, well, it's internet's really phones, maybe a utility, this is a lease, et cetera, et cetera. Here's a proof of the lease. Seems like the payroll paperwork would be a lot easier to show, and sounds like you're saying it's going to be pretty much a slam dunk.
Actually, yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I would. I certainly would. Okay, yes. All right, so now the business rent payments. And the lease must be effective prior to February 15th. And that's a key date because people are saying, oh, what about March or April? No, it's prior to February 15th, 2020. Okay. And so we know that, and here's the other thing, let's make sure that you actually include a copy of the lease. When you make that lease or rent payment, you have to have a copy of that lease as a part of your documentation, as well as showing the bank statements showing that, actually the lease or rent payment has come out of that account. And it's the same with the mortgage interest. It's the same with the utilities, okay? You must be able to show that those funds were used. So it should be showing on the bank statement that, those funds were used for those particular purposes, right? Rent, lease, mortgage interest, business telephone, the internet, okay? And of course, payroll. So let's make sure that you can prove that. Now, what you want to be able to do is also attach, if you get a bill every month, you want to be able to attach that bill as part of your documentation for the internet, for the telephone, for the mortgage interest payment. You want to be able to show the invoice and the bank statements as part of your documentation for that. For this whole loan forgiveness process, it's all about the documentation, okay, to prove how you've used the funds.
Rod, quick question. When the salary wage reduction can be no more than 25% during the covered period, compared to what? Compared to, because it used to be compared to the previous year?
So well, it's what you started out with. So whatever, let's just say that you supplied the 941, okay, to get PPP. So that's the number that you're using. So if you can't be reducing people's salaries by more than 25%. Now I've received questions about, well, what about 35%, 40%? No, it's no more than the 25% reduction.
And that's,
okay.
That would usually be the previous year for the 941 compared to the previous year.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Previous quarter.
Oh, previous quarter.
940. 940 is the annual.
So if you got it in April, it would be in the first quarter of that year?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right. So here's what's important, because I still get questions on this. So what's happening is a lot of the bigger banks are staging the forgiveness process, okay? And so they're informing you of when you can actually apply for the forgiveness process. All right, so you have all your documentation, you submit it to the bank. Now, the lender has 60 days to review your application to say whether or not it's 100% forgivable, 80, 90%, whichever that it is, okay? That's 60 days. Then the SBA has 90 days to make a determination on the loan forgiveness. And then the SBA will then in turn let the bank know that, okay, it's 100% forgiven, 50%, 80%, or not at all forgiven. And they will inform the borrower of that timetable. Now, just keep in mind that the loan shows as a liability on your balance sheet. And then if it's 100% forgivable, or whatever percentage of the loan is forgivable, it will show as extraordinary income on your income statement, okay? So this is what, October? So what the earliest is February or March that you'll find out whether or not your loan is forgiven. What I can imagine is that a lot of CPAs are going to be doing a lot of business extension on March 15th. Okay, that's what I actually envision at this point, particularly if the new stimulus package is approved, because I'm sure there are going to be changes. But right now, this is the process. 60 days the bank has to review the owner submission, and then the SBA has 90 days to review the bank submission. But please, please get this right. Get your calculations right the first time, because there is no going back and making any corrections. So get it right the first time. Because I did ask that question and internally, and they said, just let everybody know to get it right the first time. Now, as you see, borrower documentation requirements, we went over it just a second ago. So for the payroll, proof of payment, right? Non-payroll, proof of obligation and proof of payment, right? That invoice, that's your proof of obligation. The 3508, the PPP Schedule A and FTE documentation. So your FTE documentation is going to be your 941, okay? And then for the 3508 EZ, that's going to be the same FTE information. So if you had 30 employees, you still kept 30 employees, fine. If you lost an employee, what you want to do is try to hire to bring your count back up to 30. Make sure that you made an offer letter, it's signed off on, the person started. Now, if you were bringing back employees and your employees were sitting at home eating bonbons, making more money because they were getting $600 a week on top of the regular unemployment and don't want to come back, make sure that you've made an offer letter to them. They've signed off on the fact that they don't want to come back, so that you can submit that with your paperwork so that you won't be penalized. All right. Now, as the bottom says, and I think this is going to stick whether or not the stimulus package changes things. All loans over $2 million will be subject to SBA loan reviews, and additional documentation will be required. And they haven't told us what that additional documentation is yet. I keep hearing internally that additional documentation will be required, and just more to come on that. So just know, 2 million and above, you're going to really be scrutinized. That's the long and the short of it.
And Rod, just to clarify, you said the S form kind of replaces these. Is that, just want to reiterate if I'm understanding that correct?
Well, you know what? They have 3 different forms, right? The 3508S, I think that came out 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. The original 3508EZ, and then the long form. I'd like to think, which is why I'm really working both forms, I'd like to think that the S form, if this new stimulus package is approved and they say 150,000 and below, the loans that are 150,000 and below will be, forgiven, then all you will use is the S form. That's what I'm hoping. But for right now, the 3 forms are in play. So the 3508S is for those loans that are 50,000 and below, okay? And then you'll use the EZ. And what I'm telling people is, for the EZ, then if you're a single member LLC, a 1099, or a sole proprietorship, still use the EZ form. And then of course, if you're a larger company, then you're going to use the long form. So right now, the 3 forms are still in play. What's driving the 3508S form is that your loan was 50,000 and below.
But maybe 120,000 and below if they pass.
Yeah, 150, yeah.
So we'll try and make sure to alert people of that in our email with the presentation. Okay, go ahead. Next slide.
So we talked about this, right? Documents must provide proof of eligible costs, right? Bank statements, your third party, right? Payroll service provider, whoever you're using, Ceridian, Paychecks, ADP, your tax forms, which is, your 941 or 940, and payment receipts, right? So make sure you have all of those to go along with your bank statement so that you can prove that you've used, the money properly, particularly for payroll.
So,
Payroll really is the easiest thing because you have your 941. Okay,
right, but you also
that's your documentation. That's easy. Okay.
Right. So just to clarify, if you're only going with payroll or mostly payroll, you still need the bank statements and you still need documentation from your payroll system in addition to the 941, or is just the 941 sufficient?
Well, you should probably have your 941, and I'll probably have the bank statements to show the transaction.
Okay.
Those two things. Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, non-payroll, which we talked about earlier, right? So you should have your lease agreement and receipts, the amortization, and this is important for the interest payment. Either you can run an amortization schedule. I probably have my bank, if you can get them, to run the amortization schedule for the business mortgage interest, because you want to include that along with being able to show that you've made the payments, interest payments on that mortgage. And then for, the utility payments, as it says, invoices from February 2020 and during the covered period. Okay, so you want the invoices, you want the bank statement, you want a copy of the checks, which should actually be on the bank statement to show, right, that you've made those payments. But eligible costs, all right? So for those of you who have been calling me and saying, well, I wanted to hire a new business development person. I wanted to upgrade my web page. I wanted to buy equipment. And there have been people that have been using PPP funds to do just that, okay? Or they've been using the money to pay down existing lines of credit or term loans with their banks. And it's just, that's just been driving me nuts. And so I said, well, there are people that are actually getting prosecuted for misuse of PPP funds. So please use the PPP money for payroll at a minimum 60% and for the allowable cost or expenses, please. I don't want to read about you in the Washington Business Journal or Washington Post.
So this is very important. If you misreport, for instance, you could report it as payroll, you could report it as, buying a new copier. If you misreport, that could make you open to an audit or worse. It sounds like what you're saying. Is that true?
Well, yes.
Okay. Good
yes.
to know.
So please use the money for.
And this is another reason to have a CPA checklist, it sounds like.
Yes, that's why in the beginning you heard me say, don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Get an accountant to help you with this.
Okay, but don't put his charge on the forgiveness form.
Oh, well, you know what? We had some frequently asked questions. Okay. So this was a big question that's come up. Can the borrower submit a forgiveness application before the end of their covered period? And the answer is yes. Okay. And if the borrower reduced the annual or salary or hourly wage by more than 25%, the borrower must account for the reduction for the full covered period, which is either an 8-week or a 24-week period beginning on the PPP loan disbursement date. So remember, you remember when the program first came out, you had 8 weeks to hire people back and or keep them on the payroll. And in the 9th week, then you would apply for, forgiveness. Then on June 5th, 2020, the PPP, what was it, Flexibility Act? Yeah. Then they gave you the 24-week period to be able to, after the 24-week period, then you could go ahead, or anytime during that 24-week period, you could submit for forgiveness, okay? Now, hopefully, again, you guys have not reduced the hourly wages or annual salary by 25%. I hope you didn't do that.
So basically, if we haven't done that, then the 24-week period is a better one to choose. It's kind of what you were saying last time you were here.
I would, but yeah.
And then put as much of payroll on that as you can, and make sure you're not putting any other expenses that are not allowed, because that could trigger, you know, audit, handcuffs, that kind of thing, right?
Well, the SBA is going to catch it, right?
Mhm.
Yes, and it will.
Okay.
And in fact, I've talked to a couple of people that are doing the first wave of forgiveness. And believe me, they're finding all sorts of unallowable costs, okay? So I just want to really stress, hopefully you've used the funds in the manner in which they're supposed to be used. There are going to be some surprised people to find out that none of the PPP will be forgiven because of the misuse of funds. I just want people to know the seriousness of this. All right, so here's what the lenders will do. You'll have approved in full, right? The amount requested by you, the borrower, and the forgiveness amount requested by the lender equals that amount. Then you have denied, okay? Just like I was talking about, the lender denied the entire forgiveness amount requested by the borrower because of the misuse of funds. That's generally the reason why you're going to be denied, is because of the misuse of funds. All right, then you're going to be denied without prejudice. Now, the lender uses this status when the SBA notifies a lender that a loan review is pending at the time the borrower submits loan forgiveness application. Okay. And then you have approved in part, which is, I think, going to be the majority of the cases. The lender did not approve the forgiveness amount requested by the borrower, and the decision amount by the lender is less than the forgiveness amount requested by the borrower. This is what I think we're going to see more of, because just in the sample size that's come into the SBA, a lot of people haven't followed the rules. So it won't be surprising that only 50%, 60% of what's been requested by the borrower will actually be approved, because again, people have not been using the funds in the manner that the program specifies. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm just giving a heads up that don't be surprised if 100% of your PPP loan is not forgiven. The good part is, you know, the loan is at 1%, okay? And you'll have up to 5 years to pay that loan. So that's the good part, is at 1%.
Rod, one thing here is key, it seems. Lenders make the decision, not the SBA. Is there any appeal to the SBA if you disagree with the lender?
Well, actually, ultimately, the SBA makes the decision. The lender is just the first, look, if you will. Okay. The SBA is the final decision maker.
So the SBA can overturn the lender,
yes,
even if the lender denies it. Okay, that's really good to know. And is there any chance to appeal or discuss this with the SBA, or, you know, most of the communication is going to happen with the lender, as so far has been the case?
Yeah, it's going to be with the lender. Yep.
So it sounds like it's really important to have that good relationship with your loan officer at the bank, and take them out to coffee, but don't put that coffee on the forgiveness application.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Okay, great.
Okay. And here's what it says here. See, if the loan is selected for an SBA loan review, which of course it will, the lender will be notified via the forgiveness platform. And we have a platform that will be letting the lenders know. So the lenders may send us a file of, say, 2,000 forgiveness, and our guy will look at it, or girl will look at it and go through all of them. And then they'll report back through the portal on the loans that have been forgiven, those that have been partially forgiven, those that have been denied. And then your bank will turn around and actually communicate that back to the borrower. So that's actually the process. And please don't call the SBA. All the calls seem to come into me. People find my number from across the country. And so please don't call me asking me, well, where's my loan in the process of being forgiven? Because I won't be able to tell you, okay? And for your local lender, give it 5 months before you call your local lender and ask them where is your loan in the process of being forgiven, okay? So don't be calling them every week asking that question. All right, so this one is key because I get a lot of questions on this EIDL. So if you remember, you can do both the EIDL and the PPP. So in the beginning, back in March and early April, companies were getting the EIDL loan first and then applying for the PPP. What the banks were supposed to be doing was for the EIDL advance or grant, they were supposed to be subtracting that amount from the PPP loan. That's the way it was supposed to work. However, when we got into later in May, June, July, people had actually applied for the PPP and then the EIDL advance. Well, the EIDL advance wasn't subtracted from the PPP. So now here you are, you're going to ask for forgiveness. Well, the SBA is going to make that adjustment for the EIDL advance on the back end. So therefore, you may not get a 100% forgiveness because that $1,000 to $10,000 EIDL advance wasn't subtracted. So if you had a $100,000 loan, you got a $10,000 grant from EIDL, okay, then you're only going to have, well, 10,000, you'll only get 90,000 that's forgiven, and you'll have a loan of $10,000 at 1%, okay? And I think that's important for people to know.
Okay.
Not much is being talked, a lot of people are not talking about that, but I'm giving you the inside scoop here and how that's going to work.
Okay. And this is only for the EIDL advance. If you have an EIDL loan, nothing's subtracted from PPP.
Right, that's correct. It's just if you got the EIDL advance.
Okay.
Okay.
And the EIDL loan, also, we talked about this last time, has a lot of restrictions, not just on the use of the money, but the use of any money in your business. For instance, you cannot give out bonuses, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And
that's correct. Because see, under PPP, you could use, that money. Let's just say you didn't use all the money. Under PPP, you could call it hazard pay. You could give a bonus, to use up all the money. Under EIDL, no, you can't do that under
EIDL, regardless of where the money comes from, not just the EIDL money itself, correct?
Right.
And so the how will that be looked at? Will there come a time where we have to account for our expenses of the business entire time, the entire 30-year period? We have an EIDL loan if we do that, or what, or is it just going to be, be careful and, random audits or that kind of thing?
I would be keeping good records, because remember, we can come back 6 years later and do an audit.
Okay. So, but presumably there's no form to turn in.
No, there's no
EIDL. But you need to be very aware of the restrictions of use of your money in the business during the EIDL. I think it's for 1 year after you repay the EIDL even. Is that correct? Or is that just during
well, you have 12 months. You have I shouldn't really call it a free period, but you have 12 months before you start making your principal and interest payments.
Right, but do the restrictions apply during the time you have the money and you've paid it back entirely? Or is it also a period after that?
No, it's not a period after that.
No, okay, so it's just, during the time you have the EIDL money, you have to look carefully at the fine print in the EIDL contract, because there are restrictions on using the money, not just the EIDL money, but any money in your business. You have restrictions on that, on how you use money in your business, correct?
Yes. Now, let me also say this. So let's just say that your company is growing and you go to your bank and they say, well, wait a minute, you have an EIDL loan, okay? Because with EIDL, remember that the SBA has taken well, I'll call it a blanket lien, but it's a UCC1. It's a blanket lien. And so the lender's not going to make that loan to you unless they're in the first position. Okay. So what you have to do is submit the banker information to the SBA through the EIDL portal. Okay. So, and the SBA is willing to do this, and that is subordinate their first lien to the bank so that you can get the loan that you need to grow your business. Because we're getting a lot of requests for that. Secondly, there are companies that are buying the smaller companies, so an M&A. Well, remember, you have to get permission from the SBA because there's going to be a change in ownership, okay? So again, you need to get, if it's an EIDL loan that you have, then you have to contact the SBA, and typically it's going to be a 90-day process. If you have a PPP loan, then you have to work with your bank, and the bank will contact the regional SBA office to get the approval for that M&A to go through. And again, that's a 90-day process. So for PPP, you go to your bank. For EIDL, it's through the SBA portal, okay, where there's an M&A concern. Because that's coming up a lot. Okay. Now, this one, the long and the short of this one is, if the PPP is not forgiven in full, then the customer has a loan. It'll be on the lender's book, and the lender must service that loan. And again, it's at 1%, and you'll have either 2 or 5 years to repay that, to repay that loan. Again, at 1%. Now, the lenders are not going to be happy about it. Why? Because they don't have a personal guarantee. They don't have any collateral. So they're not going to be too happy with having a loan at 1%, because they're actually going to be losing money on it because they have to service that loan. Okay. So, unfortunately, that's a byproduct of if the loan doesn't get, totally forgiven.
Well, from our perspective, it gives the lender an incentive to help you get forgiveness. So that's to me a good thing.
Yeah, but realistically, it's for the way that people have been using the funds lately. Like I said, a lot of these people are going to find out that 100% of the loan is not going to be forgiven.
Right. And let me look at chat to see if anyone has any questions. I didn't see any questions earlier on LinkedIn, so I think it's going to be all yours. Someone has a client with a bank LLC and PPP loan. He or she wants to move the LLC to another bank. The existing bank is reluctant to release the lien with the PPP loan staying. Are they off base in their thinking? Second question, are the PPP loans being traded between banks?
No, that's a nightmare.
Okay, so no to, they're not being traded, but is the bank off base and being reluctant to allow a LLC loan to leave and the PPP loan to stay?
You got the PPP loan primarily by the relationship that you already have with the existing bank. Mm-hmm. So, that banker is not going to be happy that you leave them stuck with an unsecured loan while you take the other part of the business somewhere else.
Right. So
they're just not going to be. So I wouldn't do it.
You wouldn't do it.
In other words, I wouldn't move the LLC relationship to another bank.
But from the client's point of view, do they have a right to do that, or is that kind of not in your?
I mean, they can. It's just not a good thing to do.
Okay, it's not a good thing for the bank to do, or not a good thing for the
client to do.
For the client to do, because the bank will be unhappy.
Yeah.
Hurt the relationship they have with their bank.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. If a loan is not forgiven and goes into default for inability to pay, who is at risk, the bank or the SBAs?
Well, ultimately, us, the taxpayers, because we're going to have to pay for that.
Well, I think in this case, our children's children will have to pay for that.
Okay. Because, all right, so let me explain. So remember, we if these things default, then the SBA is going to step in because we gave the banks the incentive to do these and underwrite them the way that they did with no personal guarantees and no collateral. In exchange for that, the SBA says we'll be the backstop and make you whole 100% if the loan goes belly up, okay? So if it does that, then ultimately us, the taxpayers, are going to be paying for that bad loan.
Okay, right. So it's, okay, that answers the question. Okay, and just clarifying one thing. And, oh.
Somebody's, go ahead.
Just a, okay. Brady, did you want to add anything to you emailed me a private question. Did you want to unmute and add anything to that question? Or does anyone else have any questions for Rod here?
The key is, please, I hope you have used the money in the way that the program was designed, which was to retain employees and then to cover some of your business expenses. So 60% for payroll at a minimum, 40% for the other expenses. And please do not, I hope you haven't used the money to update your website, to pay down any lines of credit or term loans with your existing bank, and for hiring a business development person, because these are the things that I'm hearing the most of how the funds are being, PPP funds are being used, all right? That's a quick way for you not to get the loan forgiven, okay? So please, please use the funds in the way that the program was designed, and do not color, as I say, outside of the lines.
So I just want to make a general request to everyone. I think this presentation has been one of the most useful that Rod's given, because he now has answers. He didn't have answers before on some of the exact things that you need to do to get forgiveness. And so I really encourage you, when you get the email to for the download of the slides and the YouTube presentation, please send it out to people who have these loans. I think a lot of these really salient points that Rod made are very important for people to understand. Okay, well, thanks so much, Rod. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for your questions. Really appreciate it. Please keep an eye out for the link to the video and the slides. I think this will be really important for everyone to let people who have these loans know about, because the big thing is that there are problems for you if you send in an application with unapproved expenses. Those can really come back to bite you in a big way, it sounds like.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Rod.
Yes.
Okay, that concludes it. Please stay tuned. Keep an eye on your email for our next session in the series. We have a lot of things in store that we're working on, and I think you'll be very happy to see those. And of course, we will have Rod back as often as he likes to be. Thank you so much. Thanks, Judy and her team, for their presentation as well.